Few people know that even off the court, Shaquille O'Neal remains a giant, not just in size, but in heart, and that was made crystal clear in a completely unexpected situation, a simple routine flight that turned into a life lesson. Imagine a world-famous star surrounded by luxury and privilege, giving up his own comfort to make someone else's day. That's exactly what happened, and what came next is something no one could have foreseen. If you think you've heard inspiring stories before, get ready for this one. What starts as a simple gesture transforms into an unforgettable moment filled with emotion, surprise, and above all, humanity. Shaq's act wasn't just about kindness. It was proof that even in the most unexpected places, there are still people willing to make a difference. And what makes it all even more incredible, it wasn't for a friend, an acquaintance, or a famous figure. It was for a tired veteran, an ordinary man who wore a cap symbolizing years of sacrifice. What Shaq did for him goes far beyond a single act. It's a story worth hearing, and one that will undoubtedly move you to the core. Oh, and if you enjoy inspiring stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss any of the amazing stories we'll share next. It was just another ordinary day in the extraordinary life of Shaquille O'Neal. He was at the airport, waiting to board a first-class flight to Los Angeles. Despite his intense schedule filled with events, commitments, and the spotlight, Shaq appeared relaxed. He strolled with his imposing presence, offering smiles and greetings to passengers and airport staff alike. Many couldn't resist stopping him for photos or a quick chat. He always had a witty response, a swift autograph, or even a warm hug for anyone who approached. In that moment, Shaq wasn't just a sports icon. He was a giant with a heart accessible to everyone. The destination of this trip was a charity event, a cause he embraced passionately. Since retiring from basketball, Shaq had devoted himself to making a difference in people's lives. And even with his perpetually packed schedule, he seemed to find time to inspire and help others. But for him, this flight was just another pause between commitments. Nothing hinted that this day would become special, at least, not yet. The airport was bustling, as it always is with flights heading to Los Angeles. Families, business people, and adventurous youths hurried to their gates. But Shaq seemed unaffected by the rush, maintaining his calm demeanor. As he walked to the gate, he greeted even the cleaning staff, receiving looks of surprise and admiration. The plane was ready, and boarding was announced. Shaq, with his laid-back attitude, was among the last to board, in no hurry at all. Once aboard, the first-class cabin felt like another world. Spacious seats, impeccable service, and a serene atmosphere filled the space. Shaq observed the people around him as he settled into his seat. He noticed the finer details, from the soft sound of background music to the cordial smiles of the crew. It was clear that this was a place where comfort and luxury met seamlessly. However, something peculiar caught his attention. A few minutes later, he noticed a man standing in the aisle just ahead. He didn't seem at ease, wearing a cap with a U.S. Armed Forces veteran emblem and holding a small backpack. The man was engaged in conversation with a flight attendant. The tone of their exchange was low, but Shaq could sense the weariness and discomfort on the man's face. Something was not right, and Shaq, with his sharp instincts, quickly tuned into the situation. The conversation between the man and the flight attendant went on. Shaq noticed the veteran attempting to smile while gesturing with his hands, but the unease in his eyes was unmistakable. The flight attendant seemed to be explaining something about his reservation, and he simply nodded in agreement, accepting whatever was necessary. It was a discreet scene, but one that carried emotional weight. The economy class was full, and the veteran seemed far from the comfort he needed. As other passengers settled into their seats, Shaq couldn't take his eyes off the veteran. Something about it bothered him deeply. He imagined what this man must have endured to get to that moment, carrying not just his belongings, but perhaps an invisible weight of stories and sacrifices. The basketball giant knew when it was time to do more than just watch. Without drawing attention, Shaq began to rise from his seat. Something in his expression had changed, as if he had made a firm decision. He took a deep breath, adjusted his jacket, and stepped into the aisle. Meanwhile, the veteran still waited for guidance, and other passengers were beginning to sense that something unusual was about to happen. The stage was set. What was supposed to be just another flight to Los Angeles was starting to take on a different tone. Shaquille O'Neal was about to turn this routine trip into a memory no one on that plane would forget. As Shaquille moved closer, the elderly veteran remained in the aisle, clutching his small backpack over his shoulder. The flight attendant was doing her best to be polite, but her expression revealed that the solution being offered wasn't ideal. She explained that due to a logistical error, the veteran's first-class seat had been reassigned to another passenger. With no alternatives, he would be moved to economy class, despite having paid for the comfort of first class. The man, who appeared to be in his 70s, didn't complain. Despite the uncomfortable situation, he simply nodded and murmured that he would manage. Still, there was something about his posture that betrayed a deep fatigue, as if the journey to get here had already taken its toll. He held his backpack tightly, perhaps to disguise the slight tremor in his hands. It was a small detail, but one Shaq noticed from several feet away. Other passengers began to take notice of the scene, though most chose to keep their distance. Some whispered among themselves, while others cast quick glances, avoiding involvement. After all, it wasn't every day they saw a veteran in such a predicament, especially one wearing a cap adorned with the emblem of the U.S. Armed Forces. The cap seemed to carry more stories than words could ever convey. Shaq continued to watch as the veteran was guided toward economy class. The basketball legend felt something tighten inside him. He knew this man deserved far more than a cramped seat at the back of the plane. In that moment, Shaq wasn't just a first-class passenger. He was someone who understood the value of sacrifice and humility. As the veteran passed by Shaq, he gave a small, hesitant smile. Maybe he recognized the star, maybe he didn't. But that smile, a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude, was enough to stir something within Shaquille. The former athlete realized he couldn't remain comfortably seated while this man faced such an undignified situation. Shaq looked around. The other passengers were still distracted, arranging their bags or checking their phones. He, however, was entirely focused on the moment. There was no doubt he needed to act, not to draw attention to himself, but because it simply felt like the right thing to do. The veteran continued his slow walk toward the back of the plane, accompanied by the flight attendant. His steps were heavy, and each one seemed to require more effort than the last. Shaq, watching intently, knew he couldn't wait any longer. Rising from his first-class seat, his towering figure filled the aisle. It was as if the entire cabin had momentarily fallen silent. What happened next would change the course of that flight forever. A simple gesture was about to carry a weight so profound that no one who witnessed it would ever forget. Shaquille O'Neal didn't need to think twice. He walked down the aisle with determined steps, his towering presence catching everyone's attention. Passengers who had been focused on their own worlds now watched curiously. The veteran, already near the economy section, didn't notice Shaq's approach until he felt a shadow beside him. When he looked up, he saw the giant extending his hand with a calm smile. "Sir, my seat is yours," Shaq said, his voice firm yet filled with kindness. The veteran's eyes widened in confusion for a moment. He glanced at the flight attendant as if seeking confirmation that this was real. No, that's not necessary. I'm fine in economy," the man replied, almost instinctively. But Shaq didn't leave room for refusal. "What you've done for our country is far greater than any game I've ever played. It's an honor for me to give you my seat." The aisle fell silent. Passengers watched the scene unfold, some with their phones in hand, but hesitant to break the moment with photos or recordings. It was such a simple act, yet it carried an emotional weight that touched everyone. Shaq insisted, placing a gentle hand on the veteran's shoulder, as if to say the decision was already made. "Please take it, you deserve it," he said. Not knowing how to respond, the man nodded. His eyes glistened with a mixture of surprise and emotion. He tried to express his gratitude, but his voice trembled. I don't know how to thank you," he said, shaking Shaq's hand firmly. "You don't have to thank me. Just enjoy the flight," Shaq replied, with a smile that lit up the room. As the veteran was escorted back to first class, Shaq grabbed his bag and quietly made his way to the economy section. His demeanor was so natural that it seemed as though he had always planned to sit there. There was no heroic speech, no attempt to draw attention to himself. For him, it was simply the right thing to do. The economy section was crowded, with cramped seats and a hum of conversation that contrasted with the quiet of first class. Shaq settled into a window seat, adjusting his long arms and legs to fit the tight space. Despite the obvious discomfort for someone of his size, he seemed completely at ease. He gazed out the window, letting a small smile escape, perhaps reflecting on how a simple gesture could carry such profound meaning. Throughout the flight, several passengers approached him, many just to thank him. "That was amazing, man," said a young man, his tone filled with admiration. "You're truly a giant in heart as well," added another. Shaq responded with nods or brief words, not wanting to make the moment about himself. The story was already being written in the glances and thoughts of everyone on that plane. Shaq's act had touched something deep, the understanding that even in a world filled with inequalities, small acts of kindness can make a significant difference. And the most incredible part was that he did it all without expecting anything in return. The flight continued smoothly, but the impact of Shaquille O'Neal's gesture resonated throughout the entire plane. The crew, initially taken by surprise, wasted no time showing their admiration. One of the flight attendants who had witnessed everything up close approached Shaq during the service. "Mr. O'Neal, what you did was truly incredible. This doesn't happen every day," she said with a genuine smile. Shaq simply nodded in response without fanfare, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. In first class, the veteran was finally able to relax in his new seat. He glanced around, still processing what had happened. Staring out the window at the clouds, he clutched a small military badge in his hands, as though Shaq's gesture had reignited something within him. Perhaps a memory of a time when acts of generosity were more common. The passengers couldn't contain their curiosity. Many stood up to speak with Shaq. Some merely wanted to say thank you for allowing them to witness such an inspiring moment, while others shared personal stories about family members who had also served in the armed forces. With each person who approached, Shaq listened attentively, never rushing, as if every story was equally important. He made it a point to treat everyone with the same respect he had shown the veteran, but the most moving surprise was yet to come. When the plane landed in Los Angeles and passengers began to disembark, the veteran was among the last to leave first class. However, he didn't exit the plane before seeking out Shaq. With the help of the crew, he made his way to the economy section, carrying the same badge he had been holding throughout the flight. When he reached Shaq, the veteran stood silently for a few moments, as if searching for the right words. Then, with a firm yet emotional voice, he said, "I've carried this badge since my service. It's a symbol of what I sacrificed, but also of what I gained. Today, I realize there are people like you who still honor that sacrifice. Please take it." Shaq tried to decline, saying he didn't need anything in return, but the veteran insisted, placing the badge in his hands. "You're a true giant, not just in size, but in heart," he said with a sincere smile and a handshake that spoke volumes. The scene was so powerful that many of the passengers around them couldn't hold back tears. A simple act of kindness had transformed into something much greater, a profound exchange of respect and humanity that reminded everyone how small actions can leave a lasting impact. Shaq carefully placed the badge in his jacket pocket. He knew it was more than just a gift. It was a symbol of something far greater, something that transcended the moment. He thanked the veteran with a smile and a gentle pat on the shoulder, a silent way of saying that the gesture wouldn't be forgotten. As they left the plane, the two went their separate ways. But what had happened on that flight would remain etched not only in the memories of Shaquille and the veteran, but also in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed the encounter. It was the kind of story that would be told and retold with the certainty that its essence would endure. Proof that genuine kindness still has the power to change the world, even if just for a moment. The episode on the plane quickly became more than just a memory for those who were there. Days later, during an interview on a TV channel, Shaquille O'Neal was asked about the gesture. He smiled, exuding his trademark humility, and said, "It was one of the smallest things I've ever done, but it meant so much to me. That man sacrificed so much for our country. This was just a way to say thank you." These simple, sincere words echoed as a reminder of humanity in a world that often seems devoid of empathy. Social media soon began buzzing about what had happened. Although Shaq hadn't done anything to publicize the story, some passengers from the flight shared emotional accounts of what they had witnessed. Photos and short descriptions of the moment were posted, always accompanied by praise for the star's humility. He could have just ignored it, but he didn't. "Shaq is a giant in every sense of the word," wrote one passenger in a post that quickly amassed thousands of likes and comments. The story didn't stop there. Veteran organizations reached out to Shaq to thank him personally. One group sent a letter with dozens of signatures from veterans who had been moved by the story. "Your gesture was a reminder that our sacrifices were not in vain. Thank you for showing the world that respect for those who served still exists," read part of the letter. Shaq, visibly moved as he read it, chose to respond privately, staying true to his modesty. The military badge the veteran gave Shaq also found a special place. In later interviews, Shaq revealed that he kept it in a glass case in his trophy room, next to his most important awards. "This badge means so much more than any championship I've ever won. It reminds me that we can always make a difference, no matter how small the gesture," he said. The story inspired others to replicate similar acts of kindness. People began sharing accounts of everyday generosity, whether helping an elderly person in line or giving up their seat for someone in need. Shaq's act didn't just affect the veteran, it sparked a wave of compassion that, for a moment, united people around the world. But perhaps the greatest impact was on how Shaquille reflected on his own journey. He had always been known for his generosity, but that moment gave him a new perspective. He started dedicating more time to causes involving veterans and people who had faced significant challenges in life. "I want to use what God gave me, my platform, my voice, my influence, to do good. It's not about what I have, but what I can give," he said. For the veteran, Shaq's gesture also brought change. In interviews later on, he revealed that the flight had renewed his faith in people's kindness. "Sometimes you feel like the world has forgotten about you, but that day, Shaq reminded me that there's still hope, that there are still people who care," he said. Thus, what began as a routine flight became a story of redemption and humanity. A reminder that even amidst the rush and challenges of life, genuine acts of kindness can still change lives, for both those who give and those who receive. Stories like this remind us that true greatness isn't just about what we achieve, but about what we're willing to do for others. Shaquille O'Neal showed us that a simple gesture can have an immense impact, not only for the person receiving it, but for everyone around. It's impossible not to reflect. What if more people acted this way? As you think about that, ask yourself, when was the last time you did something unexpected for someone? Maybe it's time to turn an ordinary moment into something extraordinary. Sometimes the change we want to see in the world begins with small actions, a smile, a kind word, or even offering your seat on a flight. Now we want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Which part moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective and keep the conversation going. And if you don't want to miss more amazing stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here we share inspiring stories that will touch your heart and remind you that kindness still exists. See you in the next one.